Grieving the death of a parent is painful enough, but grieving the death of an estranged parent brings a different kind of heartbreak that people rarely talk about openly. They don't talk about it because sometimes you're not only grieving the loss of a person, you're grieving the loss of what never was. The conversations you never had, the love you needed but didn't receive, the relationship you kept hoping would someday change. In today's episode, I'm sharing one of the most personal stories I've ever discussed publicly, the death of my estranged father, how it affected my self-worth and relationships, and how I eventually moved through that grieving process with compassion, acceptance, and healing. So be my guest, grab your favorite beverage, and settle in with me for this deeply personal conversation.
Becoming the magnificence in me, empowered, strong, and gracefully, with poise and elegance, I can see I am who I was born to be.
Welcome to Becoming, Conversations in Elegance and Empowerment, a sanctuary for women who desire to live with purpose, grace, and quiet confidence. I'm Sine Lusinger, your host, author, and transformation guide. Gentlemen are welcome to listen in, but this space is intentionally crafted for the elegant woman becoming all she's meant to be. If this conversation resonates and you'd like focused private support, I invite you to explore private coaching. You can find more information anytime at becomingpublishing.com. Now, let's step into today's topic. I'm going to be very transparent with you. This episode's topic is still a bit hard for me to talk about. It isn't as hard as it was 12 years ago when it happened, but it's still something I don't verbalize much. In fact, I don't think I've even told the whole story to my husband. At the time of writing and recording this episode, I've been reminded of my own story by watching the saga that has unfolded with Daystar Christian Television Network and the death of founder Joni Lamb and her estrangement to her son, Jonathan, and his wife, Susie Lamb, after she fired them both for not publicly praising her marriage they didn't agree with after the passing of her first husband. Not only did Jonathan lose his position as vice president of the network and the promised promotion to president his father had groomed him for his whole life, but he became estranged to his mother and two sisters and their families. I've said it a lot in both my writing and audio work that we grieve many times in life, not just when someone dies, but any time we experience a loss. It's my personal and professional opinion that we're not just grieving the loss of a person, but many times we're grieving the loss of the dream of them or the vision of having experiences with them in our futures. I know a lot about grief. I'm trained in mental health counseling. I've guided clients through the grieving process when they found a parent dead in their home and witnessed, at the very young age, a baby sibling shot to death. Personally, I've had to process the deaths of dreams, jobs, relationships, and yes, many people close to me. I've buried older family members I was close to, my grandparents who were my caregivers for a large portion of my life, and my estranged father. It's my father's death that we're going to focus on today. As hard as it's been for me to actually speak about it, this is one of my most read blog topics every single day around the world. So I know it's time that we talk about it here. My intention is to help guide you through the process of grief and let you know that you are not alone in this situation. Hundreds of people have read my blog post on this topic, and I'm sure there are thousands more who have gone through or are currently going through this process. If you're experiencing this, I'm truly sorry for your loss. I can tell you that you can get through it. I did, and you will too. Here's my story that I feel has therapeutic relevance and may help you. My father died in 2014. I wrote about it when it happened, but in 2021, 7 years later, I had some realizations and my perspective of him changed in some ways. My parents divorced when I was 6, and my dad was never really in my life. I was much closer to my papa, my mother's father who raised me, than I was to my biological father. Let's be honest, he wasn't there for me to be the example of a good man every girl needs. He He didn't instill the self-esteem girls need from their fathers to make good choices in love and relationships. He was absent in my life at best and left this earth without really validating me or even saying goodbye. In the months following his death, it hurts, plain and simple. During my whole life, I told myself it was all right that he wasn't around because I had my papa, who was a wonderful father figure and loved me beyond anything I've ever experienced. My grandmother used to say, "Your grandpa would lay down his life for you girls." I knew that was true. His last words to me were, "I love you, I love you, I love you." In the months following my father's death, I began to realize how his absence and negative comments toward me not only impacted my self-esteem, but they had impacted my relationships with men. I had abandonment issues with men my whole adult life. In 2014, I began to realize that it was my father abandoning me that created the panic inside me that I had been experiencing. I knew from studying psychology and studying attachment theory as a research assistant in the Couples Daily Lives Laboratory at the University of Texas at Dallas that I had the features of anxious attachment style. I realized I had huge walls built up when it came to men. I told myself it was so that I didn't get hurt unnecessarily. Being cautious and guarding your castle, your heart and emotions, is very important, and I still believe we should be wise with whom we allow into our lives. However, I began to see that I not only built walls, but I had even pushed men away. Since they had all left me anyway, it seemed easier for it to happen sooner rather than later. Quote, "When a father abandons a relationship with his daughter, she can become frozen in time relationally with the opposite sex. A 50-year-old woman may look like an adult on the outside, but on the inside, she is still working on issues that should have been attended to by a healthy, engaged father. When you are frozen relationally, it is difficult to know your place and how to develop a healthy relationship because you are working from a point of need instead of working out of a position of co-equal. There is a void in her life, and the search to fill that void prompts her to take risk in relationships, which usually results in some really poor choices," wrote Dr. Ken Canfield, speaker and author of 7 Secrets of Effective Fathers and The Heart of a Father. I agree with his statements and have said many times that you can't make sound, healthy decisions when you're operating from a place of desperation and fear. I recently saw a YouTube short about Audrey Hepburn saying that she was abandoned by her father when she was very young, and it created a sadness in her that never went away. I didn't know we had that in common. She has always been one of my elegance and style icons, but I have refused to allow that detail of my life to define me, restrict my happiness, or stop me from pursuing my dreams. I have refused to focus on what I perceive to be a loss, and instead I've focused on all that I have and all the wonderful men I know in my life. It took me a few years to work on my issues. Learning to lavishly love myself has made the biggest impact, along with practicing gratitude in every situation. When I look back on my life before doing this intense internal work, I can see that I was operating out of a place of lack and didn't even know it. I was like a puppy dog at the feet of almost any man who approached me, jumping up and down saying, "Love me, love me, love me." That isn't me anymore. My father named me his next of kin, and I had to take off my last semester of college, earning my psychology degree, to travel down to Houston from Dallas to sign his burial papers. He left what little he had to a stranger's daughter. Well, at least they were all strangers to me. All I was given was a box of his belongings. It took me 2 years before I could go through that box. What I discovered within its contents was that my father didn't live the best or most extravagant life himself. I knew he served in the Vietnam War and met my mother after he returned. I knew that experience tainted him psychologically, but what I didn't know was that he didn't get to finish high school because he was drafted at age 17. In the moment of reading his draft papers, all I could think was, what kind of monsters would send a 17-year-old boy to kill people and be killed in war? Seeing his draft papers made me feel so much compassion for him like I've never felt before. No wonder he was the way he was. The executive functioning of the brain located in the frontal lobe isn't fully formed until the late 20s, around age 26. This is the part of the brain that governs our decision-making processes. Thus, the reason teenagers and 20-somethings make poor decisions and think they're invincible. I just kept thinking, a 17-year-old doesn't have the mental capacity to handle parenthood, much less war. I always knew he was very intelligent. He had a photographic memory, something I inherited, although mine is a little fuzzy in places, I believe because of my vision issues. In spite of not being able to finish high school, he did get his GED and took some college courses before getting employed at NASA as a draftsman. I found several certificates of training from NASA that my father earned. I've always been fascinated with space since I was a little girl, so having him take me to Johnson Space Center when I was a teenager and getting my sister and I into the family room behind Mission Control was an amazing experience for me. I also found that he took some college courses at the University of Houston. These accomplishments made me feel so proud of him. Dr. Wayne Dyer often said, quote, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change," end quote. During a 5-year period after his death, I came to view my father with love and compassion. I saw him as a broken person who did the best he could at the time. Do I believe he loved me? Yes. But much like my grandmother, my mother's mother, who raised me, used to tell me when I would cry about not having him in my life as a little girl, she would say, "Honey, he loves you in his own way." Even as a little girl, I knew that wasn't the way I wanted to be loved. But as an adult, elegant woman, I know it is what it is. He did the best he could, and there's nothing I could do to change that fact. This is what it means to come to a place of acceptance, which is the end result of the grieving process. My heart goes out to him and hurts for him, and I also know that he's the only person who could have changed his life. I'm not responsible for that, nor can I or will I carry that for him. I have my own life to live. All I can do is release the negative energy, emotions, and feelings I had toward him. I forgave him, and I now see him through the lens of compassion. I no longer blame him for my daddy issues. I've taken the steps to resolve them on my own, and in the process, I've taken back my power. I'm grateful for the role he played in my life, and I'm grateful for whatever role I played in his. While we didn't have the kind of relationship I wanted or deserved, I know it had to be this way to cause me to be the strong, caring woman that I am. Many women come to me when they're carrying a grief they don't always feel allowed to talk about openly. The grief of losing a parent they were never fully connected to in the first place. There's often confusion in that kind of loss because people expect grief to look a certain way. They expect overwhelming sadness, warm memories, and uncomplicated love. But when the relationship was fractured, distant, painful, or emotionally incomplete, grief can become layered with anger, guilt, relief, longing, confusion, and even shame. Many elegant women silently wonder, why am I grieving someone who wasn't really there for me? Or, why does this hurt so much when the relationship itself already hurts? What's important to understand today is that grieving an estranged parent is not only about grieving the person. Many times, it's grieving the loss of hope, the loss of possibility, and the loss of the relationship you wish could have existed someday. I invite you to stay with me because next, we're going to look at the actual process of grief and how to move through it in a healthy, elegant way. If this conversation is resonating and you recognize yourself in what we're discussing, I invite you to apply for private coaching. I work privately with a small number of women each season who are ready to rebuild confidence, strengthen emotional boundaries, and make clear decisions in life and love. This is structured, focused work, not surface motivation. If you're navigating heartbreak or life transitions and you want grounded private support, you can apply at becomingpublishing.com. I personally review every application. I've said it countless times, and I will continue to say it. You will grieve many times throughout your lifetime, not just when someone dies. A loss is a loss, and elegant women know that the healthy thing to do is to grieve it so that they can heal and move forward in life. Grieving is grieving in spite of the circumstances. Family therapist Dr. Pauline Boss described something called ambiguous loss, which is a form of grief where emotional resolution becomes difficult because the relationship itself was emotionally incomplete, fractured, or psychologically unresolved. This type of grief can feel especially confusing because the person may have been physically absent long before they died emotionally or relationally. Dr. John Gray warned in his book, Mars and Venus Starting Over, that moving on too quickly before going through the entire grieving process and not giving yourself permission to feel all your feelings are two common mistakes people make. Quote, grieving the loss of love means fully feeling and then releasing all the painful emotions that come up when we reflect on our loss, he wrote in his book. The goal of the grieving process is to accept what actually is, reality as it is, rather than what we wish it could be. To get to this point, we have to go through all the stages of grief, sometimes multiple times. I went to depth on the grieving process in one of my most popular Season 1 episodes, so I recommend after you finish this episode to listen to that conversation. But to recap it, the stages of grief include denial, bargaining, depression, anger, then acceptance. Dr. Gray explained that the only way to release our attachment is to feel 4 healing emotions. He explains what each means and what to do. Anger. Feeling and then releasing anger reconnects us to our passion for love and life. Sadness. Feeling and then releasing sadness opens our heart to feel the sweetness of love once again. Fear. Feeling and then releasing fear provides the ability to discern what we need and can depend on now. Sorrow. Feeling and then releasing sorrow provides the ability to discern what is possible. An important part of this process is denial. Denial isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is a natural emotion just like anger and sadness. Those things are not bad in and of themselves. We should feel them, release them, and not do anything to hurt another person or ourselves while processing and releasing these emotions. Melanie Beattie explains it beautifully in her book, The Language of Letting Go. Quotes, I've been recovering many years. I've used denial many times. It has been a defense, a survival device, a coping behavior, at times almost my undoing. It has been both a friend and an enemy. When I was a child, I used denial to protect myself and my family. I protected myself from seeing things too painful to see and feelings too overwhelming to feel. Denial got me through my traumatic situations when I had no other resources for survival. Denial protected me from pain, but it also rendered me blind to my feelings, my needs, and myself. It was like a thick blanket that covered and smothered me. When the winds of change blow through, upsetting a familiar structure and preparing me for the new, I pick up my blanket and hide for a while. Then something happens, and I see that I am moving forward. The experience was necessary, connected, not at all a mistake, but an important part of healing, she wrote. In my personal experience and observation, a person can go back and forth between these stages of grief until they finally arrive at acceptance. During my darkest time while grieving the loss of a relationship, I went through denial, depression, denial, bargaining, denial, depression, anger, depression, anger. I was never allowed to feel it before, so it took its toll in this process. And finally, acceptance. You may think you've worked through a stage and have gone on to another, only to realize that you still had issues in that area. It's perfectly fine and normal to go back and deal with it. When it came to grieving the death of my estranged father, I didn't feel like I had a right to grieve. Like he was a stranger not in my life and I didn't have the right, nor was it my place to grieve. However, later it dawned on me that not only was I his biological daughter and the person he named his next of kin who had to sign the paperwork the day before so that he could be buried, but I had to process the death of the dream that someday he would be the kind of father who was in my life, cared for me, and protected me. That was never going to happen. I had to come to a place of acceptance with that fact. I was grateful to have had that with my grandfather, and now I have it with my husband, but I had to release the need for it to come from my father. Elegant women work through the process and come to a place of acceptance. They take emotional responsibility. They practice self-rescue. They do the internal work. They have emotional dignity. When I was working with children and families as a behavioral clinician, my trainer said, "You know when a client is improving because the intense pain lessens and they cycle through the stages of grief less frequently." I encourage you during any grieving period, but especially when grieving the death of an estranged parent, to give it time. I've seen many examples of women moving on before going through the entire process or even starting it at all. By avoiding this process, you are not showing strength. The elegant woman knows this, and she also knows that denying the process will delay her healing and forward momentum. During that same time, our trainer talked one day about the difference between grief and depression. He explained that depression is thought to be caused by a clinical imbalance in the brain, and it can be treated with medication. Grief, on the other hand, always involves a loss. It is the pain of not getting something you desperately wanted and may or may not have depression symptoms. If depression is present, then medication can be prescribed. However, the treatment for grief is always talk therapy. He asked our group, what is the time frame for a person to stop grieving? When will they be finished? There were as many answers as there were people in the room, but he echoed my statements. They're finished whenever they're finished, I said. I'll remind you that you are a treasure, so please be gentle with yourself. Do the internal work by feeling all the emotions that come up and releasing them. Give it time. You will get through this, I promise. You'll also come out better than ever if you take the time you need to fully heal. Rushing the process only leads to baggage that you'll have to deal with eventually. Quote, grief is a cleansing process. It's an acceptance process. It moves us from our past into today and into a better future, a future free of sabotaging behaviors, a future that holds more options than our past, Beatty wrote in her book. It's important during this process not to allow others to tell you what you can or should feel. Fully experience all the emotions that come up. Identify them and write them down if needed so you can release them. I suggest burning the paper after writing it down. There's something about burning negative emotions put on paper that brings a cleansing in my experience. It also doesn't allow others to use your emotions against you. A loss has been experienced by you, and it is all right to grieve. Healing is an inside job. No one can give it to you, and if they did, they could also take it away. It's important during this time to feel empowered. Nothing is more empowering in my personal and professional opinion than to rescue yourself. Getting all the negative feelings and emotions out is the first step. It clears the way for positive thinking and feeling to rule your internal world again. Many women come to me when they're trying to untangle complicated grief, unresolved family pain, and the emotional impact of relationships that never became what they desperately needed them to be. Sometimes the loss itself happened years ago, but emotionally, they still feel frozen between heartbreak, anger, guilt, and longing. If you're navigating grief, estrangement, identity shifts, or emotionally painful family dynamics right now, the Clarity Reset was created for these deeply personal moments. It's a private 50-minute session designed to help you process what you're experiencing with honesty, compassion, and emotional clarity so you can begin moving forward without abandoning yourself in the process. You can learn more and book your session anytime without an application at becomingpublishing.com. I invite you to stay with me because next I'm going to lead you through some exercises to help you move through the grieving process. Many of the ideas we're exploring this season are expanded on in my newest book, Becoming Lavishly Loving, available on Spotify, my website, and most online booksellers. It explores intuition, emotional boundaries, and protecting your inner world with elegance. For women who are ready to apply this work in real time, not just understand it intellectually, I offer a private 3-month coaching container where we rebuild confidence and clarity from the inside out. You can learn more and apply at becomingpublishing.com. Now I invite you to take a few minutes with me to go through an exercise before we move on. You'll want to make sure that you're in a safe and quiet place. It's a good idea to have a pen and paper or notes app or word processor handy. So that means you don't want to be writing while driving. You can just say your answers out loud if you are behind the wheel. Step 1. When having a rough day while going through the grieving process, ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling? Am I feeling hurt? Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling great loss? Am I feeling hopeless and fearful of the present or future? Is there something else I'm feeling that I can identify? Step 2. Once you've identified your feelings, allow yourself to feel them fully, especially if they're negative ones. However, I want to caution you to not do anything that will cause harm to yourself or others. If you need to punch a pillow, kick a soccer ball, cry, scream, or write a nasty letter to someone telling them off, then burn it or rip it up and throw it away so that no one can use it against you. Then I'd advise you to do that to release the feelings. Step 3. Once you've done this, say, "Thank you for showing me that information. It's very interesting. I no longer need to experience this, and I release it. I send love to myself and everyone involved. I know that we all did the best we could in the moment, given the information we had available to us. I forgive myself and everyone involved." Step 4. This is where you can use positive affirmations to encourage yourself and replace the negativity with positivity. I invite you to say out loud to yourself so that your ears can hear it and your brain can process it. No matter what has happened to me, I am resilient and I will come back better and stronger than before. I am strong. Nothing has my permission to derail my life, my emotions, or my inner kingdom. Regardless of how I'm feeling in this moment, I know that the best is yet to come for me and I'm open to receiving it. It is often said that we cannot change what we do not acknowledge. The goal of the grieving process is to eventually, however long that may take for each person, to come to a place of acceptance, which is being able to not only acknowledge what is, but also to not try and make it something you wish it to be. You don't have to like it. You just have to accept that it is what it is. Once we accept something, if we don't like it, we are then in a stage of empowerment to change it. We cannot change another person, but we can take stock of our assets and decide what we can change in our own lives. When I was training to be a recovery coach, we were told to make a list with each client of his or her assets. The population we were working with did not consist of Wall Street bankers or people of wealth. Most of them were homeless. Many of them had nothing that most people would consider an asset. Through this process, however, I began to see that the things I took for granted were actually my assets, such as having a driver's license or ID, a public transportation pass or car, a phone, an address, access to a computer and the internet, and much more. When we are able to accept the reality of our lives and situations and take stock of our assets and our options, then we can change what we don't like by using whatever assets we have to do so. I realize that some people may look at me and think I have a great life, and in many ways I do. I'm grateful for what I do have. I still have big dreams I'm working toward, but I've come to the realization that we have to get through the grieving process first before we can truly fulfill our potential. When we grieve the perceived losses in life, it puts us in a place of acceptance. It's the last step in the grieving process and the only place from which we can make healthy decisions for change. As hard as this may be to fathom, acceptance actually brings us into reality so we can enjoy the gift of the present. Merriam-Webster defines the root word accept as endure without protest or reaction, to recognize as true. Personally, I don't think that acceptance means that we have to like what is, but we do have to acknowledge that it is what it is and be all right with it, while not letting it bother us. In her book, Beatty advised that you tell yourself, quote, I know this is exactly the way it's supposed to be for this moment, end quote. That's a very freeing statement that comes with a lot of hope in the way I read it. Accepting yourself and your situation, knowing that it is only momentary and that you give it your full permission and faith to change in a positive way is very empowering. So I encourage you to take back your power today. Do the internal work outlined here and keep the faith that all things are working out for your highest good. You will get through the grief, be able to see the lessons in the process, and see the person who is gone in a new light. If you're grieving the death of an estranged parent, I want you to know that your feelings are valid, even if the relationship itself was complicated, painful, or incomplete. You still experienced a loss, and the elegant woman gives herself permission to grieve honestly, hear fully, and move forward compassionately. For me, acceptance didn't mean pretending my father suddenly became the man I once needed him to be. Acceptance meant acknowledging reality with honesty while choosing compassion over bitterness and empowerment over victimhood. It meant taking back my power, and that's my invitation for you today too. Many women come to me when they're navigating grief, heartbreak, identity shifts, and emotionally painful transitions that quietly impact every area of their lives. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd be honored to continue the journey of becoming with you. I invite you to follow the show on whichever platform you like to listen to podcasts for weekly elegance and empowerment conversations. Becoming Conversations in Elegance and Empowerment is recognized among the top Elegance podcasts of 2026 by FeedSpot. If you found something enlightening in this episode, be my guest and share it with your fabulous friends who could benefit from these conversations. If you're interested in private coaching or the Clarity Reset session, you can learn more at becomingpublishing.com. I'm also available for guest appearances and conversations with podcasters, women's organizations, and community leaders. If this episode spoke to your hearts, I invite you to explore my latest book, Becoming Lavishly Loving. It's available on Spotify, Audible, most online booksellers, and my online store at becomingpublishing.com. This is where awareness begins to become something more. Grief changes us, sometimes quietly, sometimes painfully, sometimes all at once. But I truly believe the elegant woman eventually reaches a moment where she realizes that healing is not about pretending the loss didn't matter. It's about no longer allowing the loss to define her identity, her future, or her ability to experience love, peace, and joy again. Thank you so much for spending time with me on Becoming Conversations in Elegance and Empowerment. If something in today's conversation spoke to you and deeper focused support feels right, I invite you to explore private coaching at becomingpublishing.com. Until next time, stay elegant, stay empowered.
Becoming the magnet.